It began with a decision so unexpected that even veteran palace aides reportedly struggled to believe it. Deep inside royal circles, whispers spread that Prince William had issued a final order concerning Balmoral, one that would permanently alter Queen Camilla's place within the monarchy's most sacred sanctuary. At first, insiders dismissed it as gossip. Then the signs began appearing one after another, and suddenly, the impossible no longer seemed impossible. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. According to reports circulating among royal insiders, the story did not begin with a public announcement or an official palace statement. It began behind closed doors, where conversations were said to be taking place far from public view. Sources familiar with the atmosphere inside royal circles claimed that Prince William had quietly gathered a small group of trusted advisors, estate officials, and senior figures connected to Balmoral. The meetings reportedly carried an unusual sense of urgency. Staff members who normally handled routine estate matters suddenly found themselves operating under stricter instructions, while whispers about future access arrangements started spreading through palace corridors. At first, few people paid attention. After all, Balmoral had always been surrounded by privacy and tradition. But this time felt different. Palace insiders allegedly noticed unusual administrative activity connected to the estate, prompting speculation that something significant was being prepared. Questions quickly emerged about Queen Camilla's future role within royal properties and whether long-standing arrangements were being reconsidered. What made the rumors even more explosive was the level of secrecy surrounding them. Reports suggest that senior staff were instructed to remain silent, refusing to discuss matters that would normally generate little concern. That silence only fueled the growing speculation. The more people were told nothing was happening, the more they became convinced that something major was unfolding behind the scenes. Meanwhile, observers began connecting a series of seemingly unrelated events that had occurred over previous months. Small decisions, private meetings, and subtle shifts in royal dynamics suddenly appeared to form part of a much larger picture. Insiders claimed that tensions surrounding the future direction of the monarchy had been building for far longer than the public realized. Some even suggested that a major confrontation had been quietly brewing beneath the surface for months, hidden behind carefully managed smiles and public appearances. At the center of it all stood Prince William, increasingly viewed as a future king determined to protect what he believed the crown should represent in the years ahead. Reports suggest he had become more focused than ever on safeguarding royal traditions, preserving key institutions, and strengthening the foundations of the monarchy for the next generation. As rumors continued to spread, one unsettling possibility began gaining momentum inside royal circles. This was not merely an administrative adjustment involving Balmoral. It was something far larger. It was a struggle over influence, authority, and the future balance of power within the House of Windsor itself. And if those whispers were true, then the decision concerning Balmoral was only the beginning of a much deeper battle that was about to shake the monarchy to its core. But the roots of this conflict stretched far beyond a single decision it began, with a battle over who truly controls the future of the monarchy itself. For generations, Balmoral was more than a royal residence. It was the emotional heart of the monarchy, a place where monarchs escaped politics and connected with the legacy of those who came before them. And according to palace observers, that legacy had become the center of an increasingly bitter power struggle. To understand why the reported decisions surrounding Balmoral created such shockwaves, it is necessary to understand what the estate truly represents inside the royal family. For many people, Balmoral is simply another royal property. But within palace circles, it has long been regarded as something far more significant. It is woven into the identity of the monarchy itself, carrying decades of memories, traditions, and deeply personal connections that stretch across generations. Long before Prince William became heir to the throne, long before current tensions reportedly emerged behind palace walls, Balmoral stood as a symbol of continuity. It represented stability during times of uncertainty and tradition during periods of dramatic change. That symbolism became even stronger through its close association with the late Queen Elizabeth II, whose connection to the estate was known to be profoundly personal. Reports suggest she viewed Balmoral not merely as a retreat, but as a place where the burdens of monarchy could temporarily give way to reflection, family, and duty. It is perhaps because of that history that the estate has taken on such importance in discussions about the future of the crown. According to insiders, Prince William has long understood the emotional and symbolic power Balmoral holds within the institution he is preparing to inherit. Sources close to royal circles claim he views the estate as one of the last remaining links connecting future generations to the values that shaped previous reigns. In that sense, Balmoral is not simply land or property. It is a reminder of responsibility, a reminder of sacrifice, a reminder that the monarchy survives only when each generation accepts its obligation to protect what was entrusted to them by those who came before. Yet, as these ideals continued to guide some members of the royal household, reports suggest others favored a different vision for the future. That difference in perspective gradually became impossible to ignore. Palace observers began noticing growing concerns about competing influences surrounding the estate and what role those influences might play in years to come. What had once been quiet disagreements reportedly evolved into deeper questions about authority, succession, and long-term control. Traditionalists believed certain boundaries should remain untouched. Others were said to favor a more modern approach to royal life. Neither side appeared willing to surrender its position easily. As a result, Balmoral became something unexpected, a symbol through which broader conflicts about the monarchy's future could be fought. The tension surrounding these competing visions reportedly intensified with each passing month. Small decisions carried greater meaning. Private conversations generated increasing speculation. Every development seemed to reinforce the belief that a larger struggle was unfolding beneath the surface. According to insiders, Balmoral was no longer simply a beloved royal sanctuary. It had become a symbolic battlefield where questions of influence, legacy, and royal authority were being tested. The estate stood at the center of an increasingly fragile balance, with different factions watching closely to see which vision of the monarchy would ultimately prevail. And as the significance of Balmoral grew, so did fears that competing royal factions were heading toward an unavoidable collision. What appeared calm in public reportedly concealed a widening divide behind closed doors. According to royal insiders, disagreements that once remained private were becoming impossible to ignore, and Balmoral sat at the center of every conversation. As speculation surrounding Balmoral intensified, the atmosphere within royal circles reportedly became increasingly difficult to navigate. On the surface, everything appeared unchanged. Official engagements continued. Public appearances projected unity. Carefully chosen statements reinforced the image of a stable institution moving confidently toward the future. Yet behind that carefully maintained facade, insiders claimed a very different story was unfolding. Conversations that had once remained confined to private rooms were reportedly spreading throughout the highest levels of palace life. What began as isolated concerns gradually evolved into a much larger struggle, one involving influence, authority, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. According to palace observers, growing differences between Prince William's circle and those aligned with Queen Camilla were becoming harder to conceal. While no public confrontation occurred, reports suggest that contrasting visions for the future were creating friction behind the scenes. On one side stood those who believed the monarchy's survival depended upon protecting traditions that had guided the institution for generations. On the other stood figures allegedly advocating a more flexible approach to royal influence and modern leadership. As these competing perspectives grew stronger, Balmoral found itself at the center of nearly every discussion. The estate had become more than a symbol. It had become a test of who would shape the monarchy's next chapter. At the same time, questions surrounding the future after King Charles reportedly added another layer of tension. Though no one publicly spoke about succession beyond established constitutional realities, insiders claimed private conversations increasingly focused on what the institution might look like under William's leadership. Those discussions allegedly sparked concerns among individuals who feared losing influence once a new era began. Palace observers suggested that alliances were quietly forming as various figures attempted to position themselves for whatever changes might lie ahead. No declarations were made, no official sides were announced. Yet according to reports, senior courtiers began gravitating toward different camps, each convinced they understood what was best for the crown. For Prince William, sources suggest the challenge extended far beyond personal disagreements. Insiders claimed he had become increasingly focused on strengthening his long-term leadership position, determined to ensure that key royal institutions remained protected from uncertainty. The preservation of tradition reportedly became a central priority. Every decision carried greater significance. Every discussion appeared connected to broader questions about legacy and responsibility. Supporters viewed these efforts as necessary preparation for the future. Critics reportedly saw them as evidence of an emerging power struggle. Regardless of perspective, one thing became increasingly clear: the stakes were rising. Rumors also began circulating that estate access and long-standing privileges had become contentious issues during private discussions. While details remained heavily guarded, reports suggest disagreements over authority and influence extended into areas once considered settled. What had previously been routine matters allegedly became subjects of intense scrutiny. Palace insiders described a growing sense of unease as speculation continued to spread. The deeper people looked, the more they became convinced that something significant was approaching. By this stage, observers claimed tensions had reached levels rarely witnessed in recent royal history. Small developments triggered major reactions. Private concerns evolved into broader institutional questions. The divide that once existed only in whispers was becoming impossible to ignore. And as uncertainty continued to grow, many insiders began watching for the moment that would finally force the conflict into the open. Then came the moment many insiders now describe as the turning point, the event that transformed quiet disagreements into decisive action. When the decision finally arrived, insiders reportedly described it as swift, uncompromising, and impossible to reverse. For years, speculation had surrounded William's intentions. Now, according to multiple reports, he was ready to act. For months, perhaps even longer, palace observers had watched the growing tension surrounding Balmoral with increasing fascination. Rumors had circulated. Private discussions had reportedly taken place. Senior figures were said to be weighing possibilities that few outside royal circles could fully understand. Yet despite all the speculation, no one knew exactly when the moment would arrive. Then, according to insiders, everything changed. What had once been whispered about in corridors and discussed behind closed doors allegedly became reality through a decision that many now describe as one of the most significant signals of William's future leadership. It was not a gradual shift. It was not a tentative step. Reports suggest it was a decisive move that instantly altered the conversation surrounding Balmoral and the balance of influence connected to it. According to multiple palace sources, William authorized a major restructuring of future Balmoral arrangements, a move that reportedly reflected years of careful consideration. Those familiar with the discussions claimed the decision was designed to secure the estate's long-term role within the monarchy and ensure that its traditions remained protected from uncertainty. Supporters viewed the move as an act of stewardship. Critics reportedly interpreted it as a bold assertion of authority. Either way, few disputed its significance. The message was impossible to miss. The future of Balmoral would not be left to chance. Reports suggest that William's advisors strongly supported stronger control measures surrounding the estate. According to insiders, concerns had grown over the need for greater clarity regarding future responsibilities, access arrangements, and administrative oversight. Palace officials allegedly believed that maintaining consistency was essential as the monarchy prepared for eventual transitions ahead. What began as internal reviews reportedly evolved into a broader effort to establish firm protocols capable of guiding the estate well into the future. As these discussions intensified, palace staff were said to receive new directives concerning estate procedures. While details remained closely guarded, observers noted an unmistakable shift in tone. The atmosphere surrounding Balmoral had changed. At the center of the growing controversy stood persistent speculation regarding Queen Camilla's future involvement. Although no official confirmation emerged, insiders claimed the restructuring would significantly limit her influence over future Balmoral matters. That possibility immediately triggered widespread discussion throughout royal circles. For some, it represented a natural evolution of succession planning. For others, it appeared to signal something far more dramatic. The debate quickly expanded beyond Balmoral itself, becoming a broader conversation about authority, legacy, and the shape of the monarchy's next era. Royal observers described the move as a declaration of intent from a future king, increasingly willing to define his own path. For years, William had been viewed as preparing carefully for the responsibilities that awaited him. Now, according to reports, he was demonstrating exactly how seriously he approached that responsibility. The decision suggested confidence. It suggested preparation. Most importantly, it suggested readiness. Those closest to the institution reportedly viewed the development as proof that William was no longer simply preparing for leadership, he was actively shaping the foundations of it. Perhaps most striking was the speed at which everything appeared to unfold. Courtiers who expected prolonged negotiations were reportedly stunned by how quickly events progressed. Long-standing assumptions suddenly seemed vulnerable. Established expectations were called into question. The future that many had imagined began to look very different almost overnight. Yet, while the decision itself generated enormous attention, insiders quietly hinted that the most explosive developments were still to come. Because beyond the official discussions, beyond the restructuring, and beyond the growing speculation, emotions inside royal circles were beginning to reach a boiling point. But while the order itself caused shockwaves, the reaction inside royal circles proved even more dramatic. Almost immediately, palace corridors reportedly filled with whispers. Some viewed William's move as necessary protection of royal tradition. Others saw it as the beginning of a new and uncertain chapter within the family. The reaction was swift, emotional, and far more intense than many insiders had anticipated. What had started as speculation surrounding Balmoral suddenly became the dominant topic of conversation throughout royal circles. According to palace sources, staff members, advisors, and long-serving courtiers found themselves discussing the implications of William's decision with growing urgency. For some, the move represented a powerful act of leadership. At a moment, uncertainty seemed to be surrounding the institution from every direction. For others, it raised uncomfortable questions about what the future might hold for relationships already strained by years of private disagreements. The divide was no longer hidden. It was now being felt throughout the very heart of the royal household. Supporters of William reportedly praised what they viewed as his unwavering commitment to duty. According to insiders, many believed he was acting not out of personal ambition, but out of a determination to preserve traditions that had defined the monarchy for generations. To these supporters, the decision reflected the same values that had guided previous heirs and sovereigns during moments of institutional uncertainty. They argued that leadership often required difficult choices, especially when the future of the crown was involved. In their view, William was demonstrating a willingness to make those choices regardless of how controversial they might become. That perception only strengthened the growing image of a future king prepared to place responsibility above popularity. Yet not everyone shared that perspective. Reports suggest that some figures inside royal circles worried about the long-term consequences of the move. Critics allegedly feared that limiting influence in one area could deepen existing divisions elsewhere. They questioned whether the decision might create new tensions at a time when unity was already fragile. According to palace observers, concerns began emerging about how different branches of the family would respond as the implications became clearer. What supporters celebrated as decisive leadership, others interpreted as the beginning of a more complicated and uncertain chapter. Those competing interpretations only added fuel to an already growing controversy. Meanwhile, estate officials reportedly found themselves adjusting to new expectations and procedures. Sources claim that discussions once considered routine suddenly carried far greater significance. Every directive appeared connected to broader questions about authority and future governance. Even small administrative developments became subjects of intense scrutiny. As word spread beyond palace walls, media interest exploded. Royal commentators, journalists, and observers began dissecting every detail they could find. Speculation multiplied rapidly. New theories emerged almost daily. With each report, public fascination grew stronger, drawing even greater attention to the controversy. At the same time, conversations about the monarchy's future balance of power became increasingly difficult to avoid. The debate was no longer focused solely on Balmoral. It had evolved into a much larger discussion about influence, succession, and who would ultimately help shape the institution's next era. According to insiders, relationships inside the palace became noticeably more strained as these conversations intensified. Long-standing alliances reportedly faced new pressures. Trust became harder to maintain. Every interaction seemed vulnerable to interpretation. Every decision appeared to carry hidden meaning. As emotions continued to rise and speculation showed no signs of slowing, many observers began to realize that the controversy itself was only part of the story. Beneath the headlines and palace whispers lay something far more significant. The true impact of William's decision extended beyond immediate reactions and personal disagreements. It was exposing deeper truths about the institution, its future, and the forces quietly competing to influence it. Yet, the biggest consequence was not the controversy itself. It was what the decision revealed about the monarchy's future. To many royal watchers, this was about far more than Balmoral. It was a statement, a signal that Prince William intended to shape the monarchy according to his own vision, regardless of how controversial that vision might become. As the debate continued to spread through royal circles, one conclusion began appearing again and again in conversations among insiders, commentators, and longtime observers of the monarchy. The controversy surrounding Balmoral was no longer being viewed as an isolated dispute. It had evolved into something much larger. According to those following developments closely, the decision represented a defining moment in William's journey toward the throne. It was not simply about estate management or administrative authority. It was about the principles that would guide a future reign. For supporters, the message seemed unmistakable. Duty would come first. Tradition would come first, the institution itself would come first, and if difficult choices had to be made in service of those priorities, William appeared increasingly willing to make them. Reports suggest that this commitment to duty has become one of the central themes shaping William's approach to leadership. Palace insiders claim he has grown increasingly focused on protecting the long-term stability of the monarchy, even when doing so risks creating tension within personal relationships. That perception has fueled both admiration and criticism. Supporters argue that every successful monarch eventually faces moments when personal loyalties must be balanced against institutional responsibility. In their view, William's actions demonstrate an understanding of that reality. They see a future king preparing himself for decisions that are rarely easy but often necessary. To them, Balmoral became a symbol of that philosophy, a reminder that leadership sometimes demands sacrifice. At the same time, observers note that the decision has reinforced the importance of safeguarding royal institutions during a period of uncertainty. The monarchy has spent years navigating public scrutiny, changing expectations, and internal challenges. Against that backdrop, William's reported actions were interpreted by many as an effort to strengthen foundations before future transitions take place. According to palace sources, concerns about continuity have become increasingly significant behind the scenes. Every discussion about Balmoral eventually led back to a broader question. How should the monarchy preserve its identity while preparing for the future? The answer, supporters believe, lies in decisive leadership. That perception has sparked growing public interest in William's eventual reign. Royal commentators have begun drawing comparisons between his approach and those of previous heirs who faced similarly complex challenges. Some see echoes of monarchs who prioritized stability during turbulent periods. Others point to moments in royal history when future sovereigns established authority long before officially ascending the throne. While the comparisons vary, the underlying theme remains consistent. Observers increasingly view William as a figure determined to shape events rather than simply react to them. Perhaps most significantly, the move has been widely interpreted as a demonstration of independence. For years, discussions about the monarchy's future often centered on inherited expectations and established relationships. Now, according to insiders, William appears increasingly willing to define his own course. That willingness has altered perceptions throughout royal circles. Palace observers describe a subtle but undeniable shift in power dynamics. Long-standing assumptions are being reassessed. Future influence is being recalculated. Individuals once considered central figures are finding themselves operating within a changing landscape. The result is a monarchy entering a new phase, one shaped not only by tradition, but by the emergence of a leader eager to leave his own mark upon the institution. Yet even as opinions remained divided and speculation continued to grow, attention gradually began shifting toward another crucial question. Because regardless of how significant William's decision might have been, there remained one response capable of influencing everything that followed. And as debate intensified, attention turned toward the one figure whose response could influence everything that followed. At the center of the storm stood King Charles, a monarch reportedly balancing family loyalties, personal relationships, and the enormous responsibility of protecting the institution he inherited. As the controversy surrounding Balmoral continued to grow, attention inevitably shifted toward the one individual whose position made every decision infinitely more complicated. According to royal insiders, King Charles found himself caught between competing responsibilities that few people could fully comprehend. On one side stood the institution he had spent a lifetime preparing to lead. On the other stood the people closest to him, relationships shaped by decades of loyalty, affection, and shared history. Reports suggest that the growing tensions surrounding Balmoral forced those worlds into direct conflict, creating one of the most delicate challenges of his reign. Every development intensified the pressure. Every new rumor seemed to make the situation more difficult to navigate. And as speculation continued to spread, observers increasingly focused on how Charles would respond. According to palace sources, the king reportedly faced a series of difficult choices involving competing interests inside the royal household. Supporters of different perspectives looked toward him for reassurance, each hoping that his influence would help guide the outcome in their favor. Yet insiders claimed there was no easy solution. Every possible path carried consequences. A decision that satisfied one side risked disappointing another. An effort to preserve harmony could be interpreted as hesitation. A stronger response might deepen existing divisions. The challenge was not simply administrative. It was deeply personal, and that reality reportedly weighed heavily on everyone involved. Questions about maintaining unity within the family became increasingly urgent as long-standing tensions resurfaced. Issues that had once remained dormant reportedly returned to the forefront of private conversations. Old disagreements gained new relevance. Past frustrations appeared connected to current events. Palace observers described an atmosphere where every discussion seemed influenced by unresolved history. The controversy over Balmoral was no longer viewed as an isolated matter. It had become part of a broader struggle involving trust, influence, and competing visions for the future. As a result, efforts to preserve stability became more important than ever. Reports suggest that advisors surrounding the king consistently encouraged caution during this period. According to insiders, Many believed that maintaining institutional stability had to remain the highest priority. They reportedly urged patience, careful consideration, and measured responses rather than dramatic reactions. The monarchy had already endured years of scrutiny and uncertainty. The last thing many advisors wanted was an escalation capable of creating even deeper divisions. Yet while caution remained the preferred strategy, events continued moving forward at a pace that made neutrality increasingly difficult to sustain. At the same time, palace observers noted that William's position appeared to strengthen with each passing development. What initially seemed like a controversial decision gradually came to be viewed by many as evidence of growing authority. Supporters interpreted his actions as proof of leadership. Critics continued raising concerns, but even they reportedly acknowledged the significance of his influence. As conversations about the future intensified, William increasingly appeared at the center of them. That shift did not go unnoticed within royal circles. Meanwhile, supporters of Queen Camilla reportedly sought reassurance regarding what these developments might mean moving forward. According to insiders, uncertainty fueled growing concern among those who feared that changing dynamics could alter long-standing expectations. Questions multiplied faster than answers. Speculation filled the gaps, and with every new discussion, observers found themselves considering the broader implications for the monarchy itself. Because beyond the immediate controversy lay a much larger issue. This was not only about Balmoral, it was about succession, authority, and the evolving identity of the institution. It was about how future generations would interpret leadership, duty, and tradition. And as those questions grew impossible to ignore, one reality began emerging above all others. But regardless of where sympathies lay, one conclusion was becoming impossible to avoid. In the end, the story was never simply about Balmoral. It was about power, legacy, and the future direction of the British monarchy. And according to those closest to the institution, that future may have already begun. As the dust slowly settled around the controversy, a larger picture began to emerge. What had initially appeared to be a dispute over one royal estate was now being viewed as a defining chapter in the monarchy's ongoing evolution. According to palace insiders, the significance of William's decision extended far beyond immediate reactions or temporary disagreements. It represented a moment when questions that had lingered quietly in the background suddenly moved to the center of royal life. Questions about leadership, questions about authority, questions about who would shape the institution in the years ahead. And as those questions gained greater importance, one reality became increasingly difficult to ignore. Prince William was emerging as one of the most influential forces guiding the monarchy toward its next era. Reports suggest that many within royal circles now see Balmoral as more than a treasured estate. It has become a symbol of succession itself, a symbol of continuity, a symbol of the responsibilities passed from one generation to another. Throughout this controversy, Balmoral evolved into something much larger than property or tradition. It became a reflection of the choices facing the monarchy as it prepares for the future. Every discussion about the estate seemed to lead back to the same issue. How can the institution remain true to its foundations while adapting to a changing world? According to observers, William's actions offered a clear answer. The future would be built upon the preservation of core values that had sustained the crown for generations. At the same time, palace insiders describe a royal landscape undergoing profound transformation. Long-standing assumptions are being reconsidered. Traditional roles are being redefined. Relationships that once appeared settled now carry new uncertainty. Throughout the institution, people are reportedly adjusting to a reality in which future leadership is becoming more visible with each passing year. The shift is subtle, yet unmistakable. Conversations increasingly focus not only on the present but on what comes next. In many ways, that anticipation has become one of the defining themes of this entire story. Observers also note that traditional values have taken on renewed importance throughout these developments. Concepts such as duty, service, responsibility, and stewardship are once again dominating discussions about the monarchy's future. Supporters argue that these principles provide stability during periods of change. Critics may disagree about specific decisions, but even they acknowledge the growing influence of those ideals. The controversy surrounding Balmoral has reinforced the belief among many royal watchers that future leadership will be judged not by popularity alone, but by the ability to protect the institution through uncertain times. Yet, despite the growing clarity surrounding the monarchy's direction, important questions remain unanswered. Family relationships continue to attract intense scrutiny. Private tensions remain the subject of ongoing speculation. Some wonder whether divisions created during this period can ever fully heal. Others believe time will eventually soften the conflicts that now seem so significant. For the moment, no one knows with certainty how those personal dynamics will evolve. What is clear, however, is that the events surrounding Balmoral have permanently altered perceptions of the future. The monarchy now enters a new chapter defined by both promise and uncertainty. New leaders are stepping forward. New expectations are taking shape. New challenges wait on the horizon. And at the center of it all stands a decision that many believe will be remembered as a turning point in royal history. The final order did more than reshape conversations about Balmoral. It reshaped conversations about leadership itself. It revealed where influence is moving, how authority is evolving, and what priorities may guide the institution in years to come. And while the controversy may eventually fade, the consequences of this decision could echo through the monarchy for generations to come. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.